For a long time, I thought Stoicism was just about not reacting, staying calm, letting things go, and being unbothered when life gets messy. And for years, SpongeBob felt like the perfect example of that. In the early seasons, he often finds real happiness simply by enjoying what's right in front of him. But these SpongeBob episodes have taught me differently. There are 2 episodes in the show that circle around Stoicism, and they teach you through 2 very different lessons. They may look similar on the surface, but if you try to live by them, they lead you to 2 very different places. The first place this idea really shows up is in one of the simplest episodes SpongeBob ever had, the paper from season 1. The one where Squidward throws away a piece of paper and SpongeBob gives a deeper meaning to it. And when I say deeper meaning, I don't mean it in a metaphorical way. Everything in the episode comes from that one moment. Squidward steps outside, chews some gum, tosses the wrapper away, and SpongeBob says it's important.
It's only garbage.
Garbage? But Squidward, in the right hands, this paper is a gold mine of entertainment.
That's what makes this episode such a perfect starting point. There's no pressure here, and no crisis that needs to be resolved. It's just 2 characters reacting to the exact same object in completely different ways. The difference, however, would later escalate into something more crucial. Squidward calls it garbage. That's the end of it for him. And SpongeBob doesn't argue or try to convince Squidward otherwise. But once Squidward makes it clear that he doesn't want it back, SpongeBob simply accepts that judgment and moves on with his own. From that point on, the episode quietly stops being about paper and starts being about where value actually comes from. All the shenanigans SpongeBob got up to afterward, including the cape, the jungle outfit, the parachute, the mustache, even the helicopter, none of them work because the paper is special. Well, I guess it is special since no ordinary paper could do all that. But what's important is that SpongeBob isn't measuring his enjoyment against anything else. There's no comparison or no sense that fun needs to be justified. Squidward, on the other hand, is the exact opposite of a stoic in this episode. After seeing SpongeBob having so much fun with a piece of paper, Squidward just can't accept that there's a new way of enjoying things. Instead, he tries to justify why a piece of paper can't be that fun.
I'll prove to him that paper is not fun.
But of course, the more effort he puts into proving that paper can't be fun, the more irritated he becomes. What's interesting here is that he isn't actually mad at SpongeBob for having fun. Squidward is trying so hard to defend a belief. The belief that value has to come from refinement, taste, and things that look respectable. And the paper is none of that. Ironically, that belief collapses the moment Squidward wants the paper back. Once that happens, Squidward begs. He trades lint, rubber bands, furniture, his entire house, even the shirt off his back, all just to reclaim something he already declared worthless. And when he finally gets it, nothing happens. He still can't have fun with it because the thing Squidward wanted was never the fun. It was the relief he thought the paper would give him.
You can have all that junk, 'cause now I've got this.
This is exactly what Seneca was warning in one of his writings, Letter from a Stoic. He stated, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who hankers after more." Squidward doesn't lack the paper. He only lacks the ability to enjoy anything without conditions. Meanwhile, SpongeBob is now happily enjoying Squidward's possessions, wearing his shirt, while Gary casually plays the clarinet to accompany him. This is the version of Stoicism most people recognize today. One of the core ideas from the Stoic school is that things and possessions themselves aren't what disturb us. It's the meaning we attach to them. Objects are neutral, situations are also neutral. What matters is how we interpret them. Or, as the famous Marcus Aurelius sums up in his Meditations, book number 7, very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Now, for most of us, that lesson about belonging and perspective is really useful. If you can adjust how you see things, you can enjoy almost anything. That does sound like a path to a more peaceful life. And it's true. I've heard people say their lives became better when they put that into application. But it's also only half of what Stoicism was originally about. Because in the original Stoic school, this wasn't the end of the lesson. It was only the starting point. The contentment works perfectly here, because fortunately, nothing in this episode actually matters. It's just a piece of paper. That's where the next lesson would step in and say, But what do you do when contentment isn't enough? Will you still be content when the stakes aren't trivial? And SpongeBob actually goes through that test in another episode called Pizza Delivery. This episode quietly puts SpongeBob through the 4 classical Stoic virtues, one by one, and tests whether he'll drop them when things get worse. After closing, Mr. Krabs receives a pizza order, even though they don't do pizza and/or deliveries. None of this is ideal, but since a promise has already been made, SpongeBob and Squidward have to finish the job. And from a Stoic perspective, that detail matters, because once you give your word, it determines what it says about your character. Notice that nothing about this delivery is their mistake, but they're told to do it, whether they like it or not. That's already the first test focusing on what's required now, rather than to keep questioning what's fair for them in the first place. Once they're on the road, everything starts unraveling in the dumbest way possible. SpongeBob obviously can't drive, so they reverse for miles and run out of gas. It gets even worse when Squidward kicks it and the boat just drives away without them. This is the moment where Squidward and SpongeBob show the differences in their mentality. Squidward treats every problem that comes after as proof the mission is pointless. Meanwhile, SpongeBob treats every problem as something to work around. One problem SpongeBob keeps bringing up is pioneer tricks.
It's an old pioneer trick. I saw it in a movie once.
It does sound like nonsense at first, but notice the pattern of these pioneer tricks. Trying to hear a boat by listening for ground tremors, moss points to civilization, rocks can move. He's constantly trying to orient himself, because that's a survival technique when you get lost, right? The methods themselves are ridiculous, but his instinct is solid. Regain direction before you panic. This is the virtue of wisdom in its most practical form, not losing sight of your objective just because conditions change. SpongeBob never forgets why they're out there in the first place. The pizza is for the customer. That's it. Everything else is secondary. This virtue becomes more explicit the moment the wind starts tearing them apart. Squidward screams at SpongeBob to let go of the pizza. It's heavy, it's dangerous, it's clearly making things worse. But SpongeBob still refuses.
Who cares about the customer?
I do!
Well, I don't!
That line is doing a lot of work. In Stoic ethics, justice isn't about laws or fairness. It's about responsibility to other people. Because, surprise, obligation doesn't disappear just because the other person isn't present or appreciative or even fair. SpongeBob doesn't know the customer. He just knows Krusty Krab promised. The hardest test for these virtues, however, is hunger. By the time they've collapsed in the sand, eating coral and arguing about what pioneers used to survive on, the pizza starts becoming a real temptation. And Squidward starts rationalizing.
Maybe we better check on it.
This is one of the most accurate depictions of failed self-control the show ever did, because none of Squidward's arguments are insane. They're exactly what people tell themselves when they're tired and desperate. SpongeBob almost gives in, but he doesn't. This shows us another virtue of Stoicism: temperance, the virtue everyone romanticizes and almost no one practices. Temperance itself isn't about never feeling temptation. It's almost impossible for humans to totally avoid temptation. But you still have to prevent that temptation from dictating your actions. When SpongeBob snaps out of it and slams the box shut, that's temperance in action. He's already decided what to do before the temptation directs him. Even Squidward, for a brief moment, understands this, until hunger overpowers him. Which is exactly the point. And finally, there's courage, the virtue that people misunderstand the most. Because Stoic courage is different from confidence. It's persistence without certainty. Bear in mind, after everything they've been through, they still don't know if they will deliver this pizza on time or if the customers will be satisfied with their efforts. SpongeBob keeps going anyway, right up until the door opens and the customer explodes over a missing drink.
How am I supposed to eat this pizza without my drink?
The pizza gets rejected and SpongeBob breaks down. From a modern perspective, this looks like failure. But from a Stoic one, it isn't. Because the outcome was never the measure. The conduct was. Unfortunately, this is where Squidward finally breaks, undeservedly. Squidward has been enduring this entire journey in a very different way. Unlike SpongeBob, he's holding on to resentment the entire time. Every setback becomes evidence that the delivery never mattered in the first place. and every hardship becomes justification to quit, to complain, to lash out. So when the customer slams the door and SpongeBob collapses, he explodes. From a Stoic perspective, this isn't courage at all. It's catharsis. Squidward slamming the pizza into the customer's face does feel satisfying, especially after everything they went through. But it's also the moment where Squidward abandons virtue entirely and replaces it with emotion. He can't fix the journey nor the outcome now, so he fixes his pride instead. The irony itself is brutal here. SpongeBob did everything right and still suffered. Meanwhile, Squidward did everything wrong and walked away feeling justified. However, as bad as it feels now, that contrast is important in this lesson, because pizza delivery never asked which response feels better at the moment. Instead, it wants you to focus on which one you can actually live with afterward. Stoicism never promised emotional numbness. It's part of the journey. It also promised that virtue doesn't depend on outcomes. Now, this is where the difference between modern Stoicism and original Stoicism become impossible to ignore. Because if you freeze the frame right there, Squidward standing tall, SpongeBob on the ground, it's really easy to misread what just happened. From a modern perspective, Squidward feels like he's won. He doesn't let the customer's rejection get in his head at all, while standing up for SpongeBob. You could say he's being a little unhinged, but that version of Stoicism is everywhere now. Modern Stoicism is often mistreated like a coping strategy, a way to reduce stress by narrowing your concern to what you can control and emotionally disengaging from the rest. That framing itself isn't wrong, but it's incomplete from the original teaching. In the original Stoic school, emotional calm was never the destination. It was merely the preparation, or requirement to reach the real goal. Stoicism was a full worldview about how reality works and how a rational person should act within it. The concept of discipline over emotion existed for one reason, so your judgments wouldn't collapse under pressure. Once emotion stops distorting what you value, you're finally able to do the real work, choosing the right action, committing to it, and seeing it through regardless of discomfort, unfair outcomes, or lack of reward. That's why the 4 virtues I mentioned before sat at the center of Stoic philosophy. It has to remain intact even when the world doesn't cooperate. It's still baffling that SpongeBob accidentally teaches us about 2 different interpretations of Stoicism, both in Season 1. But the key lesson stays the same. Peace is what sometimes happens when you stop letting discomfort dictate what matters. In the paper, SpongeBob shows the version of Stoicism most people recognize today. Value isn't in objects, it's how we engage with. Nothing is inherently miserable or meaningful. That lesson is comforting, and honestly, it's useful in this day and age. But pizza delivery goes a step further by showing what Stoicism was originally built for: doing better as a human. Which brings us to something I didn't expect when writing this video. Sadly, unlike SpongeBob, who represents what Stoicism looks like when it's done right, there's another character in Bikini Bottom who looks calm, unbothered, and free, but for very different reasons. In another video, I broke down Patrick Star and the strange philosophy people project onto him, a worldview that feels peaceful, but quietly avoids responsibility altogether. And when you put Patrick next to SpongeBob, there's a difference that is impossible to ignore. If you want to understand Patrick's philosophy and how that affects his worldview, that's the video to watch next. I'll see you on the next dive.